Hi, I'm Peter J. Ray. Welcome to Adventures in History. Today's topic is Augusta Fisher Smallshaw, 1897 to 1997, Part 1. This was originally published as Smallshaw Family Memories Collection, my mother's side of the family, or SFMC number 11, published on June 4th, 1993. And this was a discussion, an interview by Diane Palmer with my mother's mother, Augusta Smallshaw, in 1980. Well, let's get started. Excuse me. This is Dorothy Palmer recording an interview with Mrs. Augusta Smallshaw of 1251 Argyle Street, Regina, Saskatchewan, Canada, on Tuesday, the 26th of August, 1980. Mrs. Smallshaw, in our previous conversation, you told me many interesting things about your family in the early part of this century. The Prairie Family History Group are pleased that you have agreed to share your memories by recording them on this tape. Will you first tell me about your family background? Why and when your parents first came to this country, Canada, and why they settled in Saskatchewan? Augusta Smallshaw. My mother and dad came to this country in 1903 and landed in Quebec the 1st of May. And then from Quebec we traveled by train to Montreal. From Montreal, still by train to Regina. And then from Regina we came to Lumsden. From Lumsden, my dad took up a homestead 7 miles north of Craven. Dad's name was Herbert Shadrach Fisher, and my mother's name was Julia Fisher. Dad was 49 and Mother was 31. Us children were 6. I was 5 and my brother was 4. We pitched 2 tents on our homestead. Of course, I was very young and it was a big thrill to me. Then we went and lived with a family by the name of Fitzpatrick, just a mile or so from our homestead, until Dad arranged for a house to be built. Dad had a lumber house built. The arrangement was with the government that you paid $10 for your patent to get a title to your homestead, and then you had to live on it for 3 years, and you couldn't get title to your land until you had a certain number of acres broken. My dad was not a farmer. He was retired from the British Army in the Royal Artillery for 22 and a half years. He got married at age 42. When he retired from the Army, he had planned on going to and retiring in the south of France. Instead of that, he got married and had 3 children in 3.5 years. My brother was only 4. At that time, they were advertising Canada as such a wonderful country. It was a British dominion, and they wanted to settle the land. They advertised Canada as a beautiful country. You'd get 160 acres free, practically free, for $10. The husband had to be under age 50. My dad was 49 and having a young son, he thought it would be a new country and a young family. He thought it would be an ideal place to come. So that was the reason we emigrated to this country. My mother was very, very homesick, and she used to cry, "Oh, Dad, why did you bring me to this God-forsaken country?" Ha, ha, ha. Mother and Dad were a very, very happy couple, and us 5 in the family really enjoyed Canada in a lot of ways, except that the country is very, very hot in the summertime, as you know, and still is, and very, very cold in the winter. We lived there on the homestead till 1917, until my dad got sick and passed away. My older sister came to Regina, got married, and I came to live with her and took a business course. When you first settled north of Craven, can you remember the type of house your father built? A lumber house, 2 bedrooms, and a summer kitchen. And although he didn't farm the land, he rented it out. Yes, he got the people the implements and seed. They got 2/3 of the crop, and Dad got 1/3. That 1/3 crop Dad used to send to Craven. At Craven at that time they had what they call a grist mill. He used to get a load of wheat made into flour and shorts and bran. That did us family for a whole year. Dad arranged for a man to come and break an acre of land, and we had an acre of land put into garden. Dad was a good gardener and a good worker and a good provider and a good manager. This man came with 3 oxen. As a little kid, I used to remember the names of the oxen: Billy, Buck, and Bright. Us 3 children walked in the furrow behind Billy, Buck, and Bright. They were oxen, of course, and went very slow. We thought this was fun, and the nice cold furrows that we walked in with bare feet. My dad always had a very good garden and a pretty good pension from the Royal Artillery. With his pension and good garden, he provided very well. And I suppose the crop from the land you rented out? Yes, the land, 1/3 of the crop. We got our flour from that. Mother never worked outside. She never had to. Dad arranged for a 40-foot well to be dug. He bought a horse and a cow because Mother couldn't drink tea without milk in it. Ha, ha, ha. To get a barn or a place for the animals to live in the winter, around the other side of the bluff he had a man come to help him. They made a dugout stable. It was large enough for a horse and a cow and some chickens. You could walk from the hill down to the window of the stable. He had doors made. We had that for a few years. Then when Dad got some money, I think he cashed in his insurance or something like that, he had a barn built. So we were able to have more animals by that time. We got along very well, very happy life out there. Then Dad arranged for a school to be built. We went to Long Lake School for a while, but it was 3 miles away and it was just a summer school. It was such a long way for us children to walk. There was a piece of land about a mile from us, what they call a school allowance, and Dad did a lot of correspondence and had this school built. It was called Vernon School. It's come and gone now. They named the school after the Vernon post office. They used to drive the mail up from Craven. Used to come from Lumsden to Craven, and from Craven there was a man who used to drive it around to several post offices which were in farmhouses. Our Vernon post office was at Mr. and Mrs. Barnes' place. It was just walking distance from us. Dad in the winter time used to often go and get mail from the post bag. One time he just had an English overcoat on with a little narrow velvet collar, and he froze both his ears. Mrs. Smallshaw, would you think your mother and father were fairly comfortably off for those days? Did you ever find that the family was short of money, or did they seem to be able to provide the things you needed? I felt that we were quite comfortable off, and I never felt that we were poor. Dad had a pretty good pension, a lovely garden, and income from the renting of the land. We got along very well. We used to go shopping in Craven. There were 2 or 3 general stores, but the big things Dad used to write to Eaton's, and he used to come by freight. Then after a while there was a railroad built. When we first came, the boats used to go up Long Lake. They used to dock at a place called Fort Hyman. We were close enough to the lake that we could hear the boats making their noise, and it was really quite comforting. It was quite a thrill. That went on for quite a few years. Then after a while they built a railroad from Craven up to Willow, and that has come and gone. It was such a thrill for us children to hear the railroad people, the men working. We used to sell them butter and eggs. At that time on Long Lake there was such a lot of pelicans. Fishing was very good. We used to go up the lake in bobsleighs with different homesteaders, make holes in the ice and fish, and get a whole bobsleigh full of fish. That was quite a thrill. My sister was very clever at skinning and cleaning the fish. When they were half frozen, it was so much easier when they were fresh. And we had chickens. There were quite a few bluffs around there. Dad used to cut the dead trees. Before we moved into our house, Mother and Dad bought a lovely big wrought iron range called a home comfort range. I imagine there's some of them in the museums yet. We used to burn the dry wood in the range, and then Dad got a heater, and you could put the green wood in the heater. Very warm. It was quite comfortable. And for lights, we used to have coal lamps. That was a headache, cleaning the lights. That was the children's job, cleaning the blinking lights. Did you have any access to a doctor? Sickness was always a big headache, a great big worry to Mother and Dad, because our nearest doctor was 14 miles away, and the roads weren't good at all at that time, just prairie roads. There was a hill coming up from Craven. You'd never know it was the same hill today. You thought you were going to be kicked out of the buggy every time you went up and down. My mother was very nervous, and she used to say, "Oh, Dad, you're going to tip us out of this buggy." I suppose you used home remedies like most people did in those days. Yes, Dad used to send to Eaton's for electric oil and salves. Mother used to take some kind of pills. You've told me that you had one brother and one sister. I suppose you got along quite well with each other, playing together, and probably sharing some of the neighborhood activities also. Yes, we got along very, very well. I was very fond of my brother. We used to go shooting together. I remember one time we went to shoot rabbits. Dad was not feeling very well at the time, nor was Mother. My older sister was keeping house. My brother and I went shooting. There was some snow on the ground, and my brother had a shotgun and I had a rifle. He had never fired a shotgun before, and it kicked back, and he went backwards into the snow. We had 2 or 3 feet of light snow. He was completely buried. That was a big laugh for me because I looked around to see where my brother was, and I couldn't see him at all. I couldn't tell you how old I was. Not very old, 10 or 12. Who did the discipline in your family? My dad was a great disciplinarian. He had been a drill instructor. He'd been in the Army all those years. He was a sergeant major and did a lot of the training of the troops. Therefore, it got to be second nature to him. Us 3 kids were his troops, and he used to drill us. We wouldn't even dare pout or say one word back. So we were very, very strictly brought up. What did you expect when you were growing up? Did you think you would stay on the farm the rest of your life, or did you have dreams of going to the city? Yes, my mother and Dad wanted me to be a teacher because they thought I was teaching material. But I wasn't so sure of that, because when you're in your teens, you don't know just what you want to be. My older sister got married very young at 18. Then when my father died, I decided I wanted to go to the city. My brother enlisted in the First World War at only age 16, so that left just me at home. After my father died, I knew my mother was going to get married again, so that's why I left home. I didn't think I would make a good farmer's wife. I suppose you went to a country school where all the grades were taught in one classroom, is that right? Yes, that's right. We had one teacher for grades 1 to 8, and some subjects in grade 9. First of all, us children went to Long Layton School, which was 3 miles away. I remember my first teacher there was Daisy Bengerfield, a very, very lovely person. Then when Dad got the Vernon School organized, we went there and had several teachers. School opened the 1st of April, and we closed the school with our Christmas concerts because January, February, and March were very cold months and a lot of snow, so we didn't go to school in the wintertime. How did you go to school? Walk or on horseback? We walked. We went on horseback sometimes. We had a horse and buggy, and picked up other children and took them to school. Later on, Dad bought me a bicycle, and I used to go to school on a bicycle. But the roads were just prairie roads. You had to ride the bicycle in these ruts. I had to pass 2 or 3 farmers' houses. They had dogs, and they used to tear out after me, 3 and 4 dogs. I was frightened stiff that they might bite my legs. I had quite a time with the dogs going to school. Did you find that you did quite well in school? I enjoyed going to school. I got along quite well with my parents. I do feel that if we hadn't lived in the country, we would have had a higher education. At that time, that was the way people lived. It was quite a problem getting to school and getting an education. My mother and father were both well-educated people. A lot of our neighbors came from Central Europe, from Galicia, and not any of them could read or write. My dad used to write letters for them about getting their implements and paying for their farm implements, so we all felt very happy about our station there. I'd like to know more about your leisure time. Yes, we played with the neighbors' children. There were quite a few neighbors' children around there about our age, and we used to play different games. I remember one was called Pick Up Sticks, and it was quite a competition game, very simple. Hide and seek and all different things. There were bluffs all around our house, so we had lots of places to hide. Then as we got older, there were a lot of square dances in the district, and us girls, being in our early teens, were very popular. The boys used to come and want to take us. And I remember Mother and Dad never wanted us to go really, and yet they wanted us to have a good time. Dad would put up an argument sometimes. It was really, really funny. We went to a lot of dances and had a lot of fun. How about alcohol or violence? Never heard of alcohol. No drinking around there at all, and there was never any violence. This is all something that's come along really quite recently. Did you play cards in your family at all? I know you're an enthusiastic bridge player. I wonder if you learned when you were young. No, my father, being in the service in Egypt for 7 years, and the Rock of Gibraltar, and I think most army men play cards, and he was a good card player. He didn't play bridge. We didn't know there was such a thing as bridge at that time. My mother was brought up just the opposite. Her background was that cards was Old Nick himself. I've seen my mother take a deck of cards and drop them in the stove and burn them up because she thought they were just terrible. But eventually she got to soften a little bit. Us kids used to love to play cards. Then when Mother and Dad would go out at night, we knew Mother didn't like cards. Us 3 kids would get the cards out and play, and then quit when Mother and Dad came home. Ha ha ha. Did you attend church with your family, Mrs. Smallshaw, when you were young? Yes, Mother and Dad would hitch up the horse and buggy and go with us 3 kids to Long Laketon Church, about a mile away. But not very often because we were Anglicans and this was a Presbyterian church. But we went to school there and Sunday school. I remember the first minister there, a very nice small man by the name of Gilchrist. I forget his first name. And then they had what's called the WA, Women's Auxiliary, and Mother used to go to that. We didn't have an awful lot of cash, and I remember that to go to those meetings it was 10 cents. I remember Mother taking a cabbage head for her 10 cents. Dad grew such big cabbages that she was pretty popular. Ha ha ha. When Mr. Gilchrist moved away, I remember the next minister was Mr. McFadden. He had a very, very broad accent, and Mother was a great mimicker, and she used to mimic him sometimes. The next one was Reverend Charles Ross, very eccentric, but he was very good. He used to come to the school and give a little talk, go to all the rural schools and talk to the children about the Bible and different religious subjects. A lot of the children from our district were from Central Europe, and they were Roman Catholics. Reverend Ross got to be quite eccentric, and I remember driving to Silton and tying my horse up to the hitching post. And he tied his horse there, and he said to me, "How's your mother and how's your father?" I'd tell him, and then I'd see him 15 minutes later, and he'd say, "How's your mother and how's your father?" Ha ha. He got to be very eccentric, but he was a grand old person. To be continued. Well, that concludes today's presentation, Augusta Fisher Smallshaw, 1897 to 1997. Part 1, my grandmother, my mother's mother. Good luck to you with your efforts in family history if this interests you, finding, preserving, and sharing old letters, diaries, and photographs, and interviewing elderly relatives while they're alive. You might consider checking out our website, Adventures in History with Peter J. Ray at peterjray.com. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. God bless you. Take care. And I'll see you next time.